Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gerald Lawless. I'm a director of the ITIC International Tourism Investment Conference, who was involved with ATM in organizing some of these sessions over the next 2 days. And I would like to issue a very warm welcome to our panelists today, who are going to discuss on the Ministerial Roundtable what is driving investments in the travel and tourism sector. And we're very fortunate to have a really esteemed panel with us. We have His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Belhoul Al-Falasi, who's the Minister of State for Entrepreneurship and SMEs, and is also Chairman of the Emirates Tourism Council. Thank you, sir. We also have His Excellency Nayef Al-Fayez, Minister of Tourism and Antiquities for Jordan. Thank you very much, sir, for coming here today. And a long way away all the way from Jamaica, we've got the Honourable Edmund Bartlett, Minister of Tourism for Jamaica, who's also the co-chair of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Centre, which I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about during the panel. And joining us virtually, inshallah, we will have the Honourable Philda Nani Kereng, Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Conservation and Tourism from Botswana. Very interesting as well, as she's been telling us about how she's always looked at the United Arab Emirates and what the UAE has done in relation to the development of tourism in the natural resource of the desert, the very rich natural resource of the desert. So she's interested in developing that for her country, Botswana, on the continent of Africa. And today, our moderator for the session is the Middle East business correspondent for BBC News, Mr. Samir Hashmi. And just before I ask Mr. Samir to introduce it, I would like to ask our three esteemed panelists if they would mind join me on the stage. So I think we're going to have a very, very interesting discussion on what is driving investment. And of course, what really drives investment, I believe, has to be tourism demand, investment in our industry, which helps to drive our yield through the famous dynamic pricing, and therefore gives us a good return on investment. But of course, we have a lot of threats as well that we're looking at. Threats such as inflation, the war in Ukraine, and of course, the overall situation in relation to climate change. So with that, I would like to ask Mr. Samir Hashmi to now join us on the stage, is there already, and handing over to you, Samir, and thank you very much and enjoy the session. Thank you.
We'll have a lot of interesting insights from this very distinguished panel to discuss what Gerard just introduced, the topic, investments in this new landscape of the world of tourism post-COVID. A lot of new opportunities, but also a lot of challenges. We are going to be discussing that, all that and more with the ministers here on the panel who have joined me, and also Minister Kereng, who's going to join us virtually, hopefully from Botswana. Okay, so Mr. Falasi, Al-Falasi is here, and I'm going to start right with you, sir. 2 years ago when COVID happened, we didn't know when would the world open up, when will people start traveling again. There was a lot of question marks. But now, when you look at it, things are looking positive. People have started traveling again. So my first question to you is, in this post-COVID world, I mean, COVID is not over by any stretch of imagination, but now this new world where we are dealing with COVID and we are opening up tourism, if we purely talk about investment, has that changed the way now the governments are targeting investments, attracting investment, and also how are they trying to attract tourists to their countries?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It's always good to be back in ATM to meet people in person. We're still talking about recovery, even though we've seen the numbers go back to almost pre-2019 level. But when it comes to investments, I think for the UAE hospitality sector, actual getting rooms and keys still becomes a primary focus. And we've seen additional 5% rooms, even when compared to 2019. So we see that going forward. Now, the devil is in the details. So the mix of hotel rooms required changed over the past 10 years. So if you go back a decade or two ago, it was predominantly beachfront 5-star hotels. Then that evolved quickly to 3- and 4-star resorts, as well as apartments. And then came holiday homes. So investment predominantly stays within the hospitality accommodation sector with a variation of the different level of service and different types of accommodation. Having said that, interestingly enough, as you know, the UAE is also the hub for venture capital, for startups, and we've seen also a big interest in SMEs and startups to provide technological solutions, whether it's B2B or B2C. We've seen one of the companies raise $36 million recently. We've seen companies talk about personalized experiences. So the way I see it is the big ticket FDI would continue to grow in the rooms being available. However, on the services side, we're seeing a lot of venture capital being deployed on technological solutions for tourism that is slowly picking up because we've seen the demands of each and every customer change with time. We're seeing a younger generation that have a higher expectation of their experience, and also in terms of speed. Nobody's now willing to wait for a checkout or willing to wait significant time to get a response on itineraries. So speed is required, and therefore technology is becoming an area of investment we see going forward. What is the outlook? I think we are seeing a very good recovery. I've been also seeing the Fly Dubai numbers of 114% increase in travel compared to last year. We'll continue to see that growing. However, I think we need to be mindful of it being a resilient rebound or recovery. His Excellency, the Minister from Jamaica, made that point earlier in the back room, so I'm going to steal his words for it, and he said, we need to be equitable in our recovery. As and when we host tourists here, we need to make sure that the whole ecosystem benefits. We've also seen hotel operators become more responsible by sourcing locally, whether sourcing through the supply chain or even through the actual food consumption being sourced locally. So again, very positive about the outlook. In terms of investment, we expect bigger investments. Our hotel occupancy is one of the highest globally at 67%. We keep adding rooms, but the demand is also higher, so we expect that to go. Second track is technology. We expect startups to play a big role in travel and tourism.
Well, I want to come to you, Mr. Al-Fayez. Again, Jordan is a very important tourist destination in this part of the world. But as we were discussing earlier, that COVID kind of put a disrupted, the global economy and especially tourism. Now, in this world of COVID-19, what are you seeing in terms of investors? Has the strategy changed in terms of how to attract investors? And are there some specific areas which they're focusing on since COVID-19?
Thank you very much for having us here today. And as I was saying, we're so excited to be back. We're excited to be in the United Arab Emirates. We're excited to seeing familiar faces again, not through Skype or through technology, but face to face to meet again and seeing tourism coming back with limited restrictions today as it was a few months ago, and looking forward to less and less restrictions as we move forward. As we discussed, definitely the interruption of over the last couple of years was significant. And I said the interruption was not only for big players. I will echo what my colleague said. The SMEs they are those who suffered most, maybe throughout the last couple of years, because the kind of business model that they worked on are totally different, and they needed the support and help, which sometimes were not available over the last couple of years. So our attention became, okay, how do we make sure that such an important segment in the tourism industry survives? And at the same time, how do you want them to grow with time? You don't want them to start thinking of other industries, moving away from this important industry, because the influence of such industry is not only on the corporation, it's on the local communities. It is empowering women, youth, local communities. These are important messages, and these are important pillars of the tourism industry. Yes, Jordan is blessed with the diverse product that it has. We could go and only focus on the major investment in certain areas, and we would be happy with what comes to Jordan. But this is not enough for us. We want to see this trickling down to more on less fortunate places, less fortunate people with great potential in the tourism industry. Actually, one of the positive things that I would think of because of COVID, everybody today is thinking of outdoors. And no longer they want to come and enjoy just the beach holidays or the archaeological holidays. They want to be with nature. And I think this is where the opportunity comes in. This is where we'll see such important players, bringing them back, but at the same time facilitating the infrastructure, facilitating the financial support that could be leading to such triggering of an important change. Lessons learned from what happened over the last years. People thought that all of a sudden investment will stop in tourism. We didn't see that in Jordan. Actually, strange enough, it was increasing. We never saw people not investing in hotels or in restaurants or in the tourism industry. We saw an increase in that. Some of them are actually starting their businesses just beginning of this year, and some of them are going to be coming by the end of the coming year, and so on. So tourism will never stop, I think. It is how do we want to look at tourism and the future of tourism, not only in Jordan, not only in the region, but globally. How we want to see that important segment and important growth in an industry that we saw by 2019, not only stopping, but having that impact that we all wanted, all of our ministers throughout the globe wanted to see that growing. Yes, we want revenues to our countries, but we don't just want money coming into our country. We want to make sure that this is sustainable, this is growing in the right directions, this is having an impact on local communities. So I think these are the things that we're going to be focusing on in the coming years. And one of the, I think, very important things that also my colleague has spoken on is the technology. Today, I think if we look at COVID, one of the pluses or the positive things came out of it, that technology came in much faster than what we expected. So this is an opportunity that we can build on, I think.
I want to come to you, Mr. Bartlett, to get a view from, again, another very important tourist destination, Jamaica. I mean, yes, the world is now opening up. People are again going to start traveling, which is great news for tourism. But then we also saw the disruption over the last 2 years, especially for the hospitality industry. And in order to scale back, in order to grow, in order to get tourists, you need capital, you need money. Everyone's chasing that money. There's a lot of competition. As a tourist destination, what are the strategies or a strategy that probably Jamaica is applying in order to attract capital from across the globe, including the Middle East?
Well, I begin on the basis that our recovery in Jamaica has been stellar, to say the least. And the investment that we've had prior to COVID in the pipeline have come back to about 90%, which is, I think, unusual, and we're having a good experience where that is concerned. But the traditional investment for tourism has been in terms of the room stock, has been in terms of man-made attractions and the expansion and development of the geophysical features and endowments of, the country, as well as looking at knowledge development. And we have learned that a bit. And one of the things that we did by way of investment is to invest in ideas. And this is a huge new dimension to building capacity to enable innovation. So for us, this recovery is one that is going to be driven a lot by new ideas, new processes, because we are seeing that the change coming out of what the scientists are saying is the anthropause. That, the Anthropocene Earth, that's Earth since man, has never had the disruption that we had in the last 2.5 years. It was a period when we literally paused. The seas were able to replenish itself and the fish would swim and not being caught. The wild was able to have the animals going and no hunters, and the skies were bereft of the large aircraft emitting noxious odors and so on. So what we had was anthropause, the world paused. But the implications of that was that production also paused, that man's activity on earth changed. And so this new thrust for activity, this recovery we're talking about, is now being referred to as anthropause. That's when man is active again. But that implication of that activity is causing a demand, the supply of which the world is unable to fulfill. And so the investments now for tourism will have to change to look at bridging the supply disruption gaps that have been resulting from the anthropause. It is now, how do we build the safety and security arrangements? How do we look at some of the plants that were mothballed or almost mothballed during the anthropause, and to ensure that they can come back to serviceable levels and are healthy? And we have seen problems. I've been to some hotels where the internet doesn't work.
Right.
I've been to some hotels where the food supplies are not there. So the investment now has got to be, how do we build back the capacity of tourism to be the driver of economic growth and development? So we have been talking that with my investors in Jamaica. And we're looking at health and wellness, because this is a big area. We're looking at destination assurance. And how is it that you make it safe for people to move around? How do you create seamlessness in your operations? Because the expectations of our visitors are going to be predicated on a level of efficiency that has been upended by the pandemic. So my take on the game is that it's a reimagining of tourism that has to emerge in this period. And that has to find investment in relation to what's different that we have to do. How we're going to make tourism more inclusive. And back to the SMEs, they will continue to be 80% of the players in the industry. But we now have to change the formula that engaged them, where they were only getting 20% of the returns from tourism. This recovery has to see a change in that, where the small and medium enterprises are becoming better players and are benefiting more from tourism. Women and young people, who are at the core of the human capital resource of tourism, have got to now be treated better and get a better pull from tourism. So the final area that I want to mention where investments will have to go is in technology. Because the tourism of the future, and the anthropause has taught us that we could be together apart. And that virtual reality and augmented reality, and even discussions about metaverse and all that. These are new cognitive systems that are going to redefine the way forward for tourism, the experiences of the new tourism. So there's going to have to be investment in these areas, in the digital space, and also for the Internet of Things, and how we are going to train and build capacity among the human capital to enable better manipulation of these systems, so that machine intelligence, which is with us, and human intelligence that must guide it, will have a way to subsist to the benefit of all. Thank you.
Well, I'll go now to Minister Kereng, who's joining us virtually. Hello, ma'am, here from Dubai. And I hope you can hear us. Hello, good to have you, good to have you. I think you're mute. Are you mute?
I'm not mute.
Okay, now we can hear you. Yeah, now I can hear you. Well, good to have you on this panel, and I hope you were able to listen to some of the points that were made by the ministers here on the panel. Now, we are discussing about what are the investment strategies that countries are looking at post-COVID. And one of the themes that everyone's been touching upon is technology, how technology is at the heart of investments and investment strategies. Talking about Botswana, which again is an emerging tourist destination, in Africa. What are you all doing to attract investors? What is the strategy? And what in your experience, are you seeing that investors are targeting or looking at when they're coming and gauging investment opportunities in different countries?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry for joining late. Let's first start with what we have learned from COVID-19, the 2 years that tourism businesses were literally closed down. What did we learn and what did we pick? And for Botswana, and I believe it's the same with other countries, where we realized that when the world cannot travel physically, where we cannot meet physically, where we cannot even organize our tourism promotional activities and events, we had to resort to thinking about involving the use of technology, to continue marketing our destinations. The first thing that I want to share is the kind of tourist that emerges from COVID-19, because in investing, we want to meet the needs of these tourists. We want to lure these tourists and we want to satisfy these tourists. The tourist that emerges out of COVID-19 is a tourist who wants experience. They want new things. For us in Botswana, tourists were used to coming, visiting, staying in a hotel, and then see animals, do boat cruise, get into the Okavango Delta, and go home. 2 days was enough for that. But we are seeing the emergence of a tourist who wants to have an experience, to heal from the lockdowns, the hard lockdowns, the tourist who wants to engage. So we developed a diversified tourism product where we include activities like community engagements, activities in biodiversity, engagements in what we're doing to save our wildlife and to protect our forests and so forth. We diversified into other areas where tourism has not been actually active, especially the desert, the Kalahari Desert, which forms 2/3 of our surface land. Talking about the Arab market, we are talking about a similar, landscape where we are mostly desert, and we devised a program that actually wants to lift out and promote the desert as a place of investment and tourist attraction. In the desert, our desert is still very virgin, but we have got desert activities that we do. We just completed one last week, which was a great success. People just went out to do quad bikes in the sand dunes, camel rides. We have got a camel park, which has about 500 camels that give people experience, and then providing services in the desert to make the desert and turn it around into a city is one of our major tourism diversification direction, where we want to call investors to come into the country to invest in developing this desert into a Dubai-like kind of a city where we have the sufficient infrastructure, hotels, schools, road infrastructure, airports, airstrips, and also to involve tourists in our sustainability projects, because we have national parks and game reserves around the desert. So we are looking at investment in the area of schools of excellence in tourism, which I believe the Arab market does have to offer us. We have a new ministry called the Ministry of Entrepreneurship. It wants to build the capacity of our people, as we want our people to have access into tourism businesses also as key role players and beneficiaries. And young people who have got small businesses who are new entrants into the tourism industry, they don't have the capacity, and we are going to capacitate them through this ministry. The investment opportunity there is to work with the ministry to be able to catch these young, vibrant people who are interested and passionate about tourism provision, to assist them in how to get to thrive in businesses. Women as well. We have women groups. We have got groups, community trusts that also involve people with disabilities. We are an inclusive economy where we want everybody to have a place, but the capacities are limited. So when we're looking about or looking at how we are actually attracting investment, the area of technology, infrastructure, airline access and connectivity is very, very critical. We have diversified into culture, where cultural activities and cultural expositions, cultural exchanges are going to be key. We are talking about the Kalahari Desert once again, and I want to mention that this area is endowed with livestock. The people are passionate about goats and sheep, and the Arab market has emerged as a market for us to be able to supply this market with a small stock, the best beef we have in the area, so that they can be able to access it for their many activities. We are looking at sharing with potential investors what Botswana is in terms of an investment destination. We have been working hard through the last 2 years on ensuring that the destination Botswana is safe. In terms of COVID-19, we are safe for investment and safe for tourism travel. We have developed standard operating procedures that, within the tourism sector, they have actually made us to be a sector that is COVID-proof. When you come here, when you come to invest here, you can be sure that you will be healthy and you will be protected. We also do investor care, where we provide guidance, where we provide information, and we hold hands together with the potential investor to understand the landscape of Botswana and areas where we invest or we see opportunities. We have opportunities also in construction or building and operating of iconic hotels, iconic tourism attraction structures, because when you see like Dubai, you just have to stand at a structure, look at it and feel happy. So we have opportunities in that area. We have people, we are a state or a nation that cares for people. We are hospitable, we are safe, we are rated amongst the least places that have crime incidences. We are listed among least corrupt countries. We are actually a safe destination. So when we're talking about technology, we have started digitizing and digitalizing our information, where our marketing information has now been transformed into a QR coded digital form, where you just have to scan and see the 101 things we can do in Botswana and where to invest in Botswana. We have the Botswana Investment Trade Center that coordinates our investment drive. We are participating in different expos, where we are also supporting our SMMEs to participate, because sometimes it's expensive to register. So we are actually subsidizing their participation. They have just returned from Indaba in Durban, South Africa. We also participated in the World Tourism Market by ITIC in Cape Town recently. So we are actually launching ourselves in the global space, bringing our people, our small enterprises, large-scale enterprises in the tourism sector to actually showcase. And we have had very good feedback from tourists and tourist operators who are ready now to send tourists into Botswana.
Thank you, Minister, for those thoughts. I want to steer this conversation now. Of course, we spoke about the investment opportunities, the strategies that are being deployed by various countries. So I want to get you in over here, Mr. Bartlett. Of course, I mean, post-COVID has opened up new opportunities for the tourism sector, including investment, but it has also thrown in new challenges. We are living now, there's a war going on, so there are concerns about inflation, which has become. And this is also going to have an impact on tourism, because on one hand, you're trying to get tourists back. You're trying to recover the losses, but at the same time, the cost of living is going up. How big a challenge is this, and how do you see governments, tourism boards addressing this issue? Because at the end of the day, when you're getting investors, you also have to talk about return of investment. So there are multitude of challenges that are in front of you at this point of time.
I'm happy for this discussion, because I think that this is a discussion we have to have. This is a debate that we must engage in, because the recovery, as we see, is not linear. And if we're not careful, the discovery that we will have is that we have a recovery that is perhaps as uncertain and, in fact, as disruptive as the pandemic itself. So this is going to require an all-of-house response to manage this recovery, because the immediate response is one of anxiety and a pent-up demand to just do things. To do things because we need to do it. We have burned cash for 2.5 years. We've owed the bank. We have debt that is higher than a mountain. We need to clear that. So we're happy that people are traveling. But what are they traveling to? And what it is that we are offering when they travel. And this is a very important consideration for the industry overall. We are now, World Bank is telling us, and the UN is telling us, and all the gatekeepers are telling us that there is going to be a food shortage. That's a big item. Tourism is the most consumption-driven industry in the world. The propensity to consume of a tourist is 3 to 5 times that of a local individual in the community. And we had issues with over-tourism before 2019. Now we're going to find new issues of the tourists coming to eat the food that is already short, the fear of hunger and food security being a big issue. So when we consider those and other disruptive elements, we are going to have to come together, all of us. We have to incentivize the farmers, the agricultural players, to produce more food and fast. We're going to have to use technology to drive production at a higher level. We're going to have to use that same technology to ensure greater efficiency in our transportation and in a number of other service providers that we have. Then we have to educate our tourism family that it's not a linear recovery. That expectations are going to have to be tempered with the reality of supplies. And the issue of tourism being a highly litigious activity is going to have to take a pause, because we're going to have to build down expectation. So a new narrative is going to have to be created out there so we understand what it is that we're selling. And the final thing I believe we'll see is that there are going to be changes in business models. There are going to be changes essentially in terms of the financial market itself, the capital market, what's available. And affordability issues are going to be major players in all of this. So all of that has to be considered together as we reimagine and redefine what this immediate post-COVID tourism is going to look like, bearing in mind 3 final things, and I close. 1, that we're going to emerge new demographics as affordability plays a big role. We're going to find new markets emerging as also the economic realities trigger in. And finally, we're going to have different psychographic profiles of the market that we will have to respond to. All these are challenges, but we are not unable to respond to it because we are a creative being and we have been built to adapt and to pivot and to innovate and to find new ways of doing things. And what has made tourism the powerful driver of recovery that it is our resilience and our ability to find a way through it all. So I'm confident.
Mr. Falasi, I want to get in here. Some of the challenges that Mr. Bartlett spoke about, do you share that some of these new challenges need new ways of dealing with them, even when it comes to things like inflation? Food security, of course, is not a challenge here, but then when you're getting tourists, trying to attract tourists from different parts of the world, you are facing challenges like price rise, inflation, and things like that. Do you see that as a big challenge going ahead?
Well, look, inflation, or I should say hyperinflation, is a global phenomenon. But I'm a believer in free market dynamics, right? I think consumers will always adjust based on the price, and if you give it time, prices will settle down. What I'm worried more about is not inflation that is transparent to the consumer with a price tag. What I'm worried about is I would call it hidden inflation. So when you increase the price of a ticket or a hotel room or a venue ticket, the consumer really notices that, and then he or she has a choice of choosing a different product or service. Now, when you have the same product and the same service at that price, but with lower quality of service or inferior product, that's what the issue is. And we've seen it happen in airline, we've seen it happen in hospitality, where the ticket price or the hotel room price is exactly the same, but the service you get is lower. Now, that is a much difficult problem to solve for, even if you want to intervene. And I think, again, going back to free market dynamics, today, any tourist could rate any hotel, could rate any restaurant. I think with time, that hidden inflation will also be uncovered. So to me, I think that is the biggest concern that I have, especially that these sectors came out of a very volatile time. Tourism, as you know, has been the hardest hit. It's the highest exposure. So understandably, investors want to recover the most by reducing costs and increasing revenue. But again, that also needs to be monitored. That to me is the biggest challenge, I think. We're a service-based industry at the end, so you can't compromise service for price. When it comes to recovery, broadly speaking, I agree with His Excellency. It's more about resilience. If you go back 5 years ago, we used to talk about efficiency. Now we talk more about resilience. We talk more about inclusivity. Even within the UAE, as I've mentioned before, we've seen a lot of these projects sourced domestically, their supply chain. Even Expo had a big percentage of its contracts done locally. Restaurants, I've been to a few restaurants in Dubai, they started to go really beyond their way to find local food produce and incorporate that into their menu. So I think recovery that's more inclusive of the local domestic market is extremely important. And we don't want to dictate that, but I think consumer preferences drive that. Consumers want locally sourced products. Consumers want a much authentic local experience. That will take care of itself. So all in all, I think inflation, yes, but mostly hidden inflation. And I think the biggest concern we have is a more inclusive recovery as we proceed to the next 2 years. But overall, very positive about it. And we remain committed to ensuring that everything is in place. Maybe one last point before I move on. This is very important. When we started talking about recovery before everyone in the region, we knew that we have a very peculiar market. So in the UAE, pre-pandemic, 71% of our tourists were international. The global average is the opposite, 30% is international. Secondly, we don't have a domestic airline industry. So in the absence of 71% of your tourists and the absence of domestic travel, you really are highly exposed. So what did we do in order to ensure recovery? We invested a lot of our government focus on the healthcare system to make the tourists comfortable that the UAE is a safe place to be in terms of healthcare system, in terms of personal security as well. So I think with this global recovery, let's not forget the importance of the healthcare system, because that will continue to be at the back mind of every single tourist that visits any country globally. Thank you.
Mr. Al-Fayez, what do you see from Jordan's point of view, the tourism point of view, the major challenges? Is it going to be inflation? Is it going to be inclusive recovery, as the minister was talking about? Or is it also going to be to make tourists feel safe when they arrive at their destination in huge numbers?
I will start by the last point you made. It's not a concern for us or in terms of making tourists feel safe, because we have gone through a very interesting time during the COVID, where we have proven globally that we are safe as a tourist, for not only tourists, for domestic and tourists when they came to Jordan. But this is not a concern. My concern is how do we want to keep that service, which is not only in Jordan or in the region. We have felt that as we traveled. You can see, yes, there is an inflation, there is an increase in the prices, but the level of services globally, it has dropped. And that's for many reasons. One of the main reasons that we have lost a lot of people who used to work within this industry. So bringing them back with that level of service will take time. Recovery of tourism is also important for all of us. Yes, tourism is resilient, and we have proven that again and again. And I think it will be one of the most looked at industries, how it will recover. But also we have to be realistic in our recovery. Recovery is not about increasing prices. It is about maintaining that service, maintaining that promise that you have offered to the tourist to come to your country, at the same time distributing of that wealth along the country. Because as before we enter to the room is saying, we don't want to feel that it is my obligation to make that loss, which I have felt in the last couple of years. I want to make that revenue come back within 6 or 1 year or so. We will need at least 2 years to feel to get back in our recovery process. And this has to be understood by all of us. We have to educate also the tourist who is coming to our country that he has part of the responsibility with us. He is coming to enjoy, to see different experiences, but at the same time, he's part of this process. We cannot work separately. I think we have to work collectively, regionally, as an industry, and at the same time, globally, and also include our visitors. And I think it is important for the visitors who have come before even the pandemic. We saw a lot of tourists interested in what we call voluntourism, or giving back to the locals. They want to see that. And we discussed this with my colleague many times, where we said, you know, tourists, they don't want to just come and spend their money in the five-star hotels. They want to feel that they're giving back to the communities. And we were working on that. It was interrupted. I think it's going to be more seeked after from tourists as we are recovering, because they understand the impact of the pandemic on all of us. Yes, inflation is an issue. I agree with His Excellency when he said, I think the market will correct itself, but we need also to be aware we should not leave the market to correct itself for a long time, because this could make another interruption. I think we should try to educate our industry, make sure that we work with them, saying to them, yes, let's be realistic in our approach in bringing back tourists. Today, everybody is trying to offer his product, but it's not about prices only. It's about the quality. I remember visiting one of the European countries, and you can feel the change in the service in the same place that we were there. So you talk to the people who are working within that industry, and it's the same issue everywhere, by the way. It is an issue that we all have to be aware of, and it is a challenge. A challenge maybe not felt today, but down the road, tourists will be complaining about it. Yes, he will spend for the first time that extra amount that you have asked for. Next time he will not. We need to make sure that he continues, and this continuity of travel back to the same country or other countries is important to all of us.
Minister, one of the big concerns which all the ministers have raised over here is, you know, inflation, how to manage that, and also ensure maintaining quality so that when tourists come, they're not getting inferior product or service for the money they're paying. From Botswana's point of view, which is again an emerging destination in Africa, what do you see as a big challenge from a tourism point of view as new challenges are arising now, inflation being one of them?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Inflation is one of them, and you know the issue of pricing, because the food crisis that we've been hearing about, it's across board. We have got problems in producing enough, you know, for the tourism market in terms of, you know, food security and so forth. And I think that you know that also is going to heighten or hike prices of services, you know, accommodation and transportation and everything that supports tourism. I think that it is important for us to make sure that we are a safe destination. I think safety of the destination is a priority. People don't want to visit a place and then come back sick or come back, you know, not feeling well. The next important thing is the experience. The experience is at the baseline of all these issues of inflation, quality of services, you know, satisfaction, competitiveness. If I give the tourists the experience that they need to heal out of COVID and to say it was worth my money that I went to Botswana, because I was able to do one or two activities, I engaged with the communities, I became okay, you know, I'm a happy person after this, then there's value for money. And even if we say that we need to be able to control, you know, pricing and try not to overcharge and so forth, I think as we say that the market will play itself, the market will also say to us that we have given a service that somebody is saying, I paid money, but I'm happy for what I paid for. So giving that experience for us in Botswana is important. That is why we are talking about the community-based model, where we are infusing community experience also through the agro-tourism that we diversified into during COVID, to ensure that we can also involve in agricultural production activities, and engage in cultural activities, do village tours, meet with the communities, get into a bonfire and tell stories to understand the destination better, gives them more experience. And we can talk about competitiveness and trying to reduce prices so that we can prevent tourists going to the next destination close to us. But no, we have to work hard on the package that we give to our tourists. And that is what will actually satisfy their experience. Inclusivity is also key. We are in Botswana talking of driving the private sector-led economy, where we afford opportunities for private sector with their capacity to actually be the biggest partner of government. But let me say that it is important in this recovery route that we emphasize the policies that are resilient, that will actually drive all investment and guide all investment and channel all the players in the recovery route, so that we are all aligned in sustainability and in resilience and in the long term, action, so that there's no free market that allows, disruptive activities just in the quest of gaining money in the shortest time. We revised the tourism policy to ensure that this happens. We also enacted, new legislative framework that one of them is economic inclusion bill that was passed by Parliament last year. That is actually saying we should be able to make deliberate decisions, to include the groups in the economy that have been excluded all along. That includes SMMEs, that includes youth groups, that includes women, so that we can make the playing field equal for everyone. I think that, sorry, we cannot talk about resilient recovery if we cannot emphasize on the legal reforms, the policy reforms, strategic reforms. In Botswana, we have the new reset agenda that prioritizes 5 things. The first one is to save the population and the visitors from COVID-19. Then you're talking about, promoting innovation. We are talking about mindset change. We are talking about, aligning ourselves with the, the dream to actually save our population, corrupt-free environments, and giving the best experience. That means that we have to be able to all align to an apex framework, being the legal and the policy framework. So that should be actually emphasized. I think that it is important for us to understand that we are to support as government all sectors to thrive. But like I'm saying, we thrive in one direction, we thrive in a harmonized pattern, of change, and we also have common goals to achieve. At the bottom of it, all of us must be satisfied, including our investor and our tourists. Thank you.
Anyone from the audience has any question for any of the ministers here?
Yes, Samir, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Your Excellencies, for really great insights. And I think it's very interesting to hear when we talk about the standards of service, levels of service, the amount of people who want to work in the industry. And I'd just be very interested to hear, what are the initiatives to encourage young people to come in and work in this industry? In the World Travel and Tourism Council, we keep talking about how it accounts for 330 million jobs worldwide, 11% of the workforce. We can't find people to cope with the great demand for travel and the resurgence of demand for travel. And when we look at hotel schools, we look at different training centres, vocational, I'd really be interested to hear what their excellencies might think about what are the initiatives in relation to the future of education within the industry.
Well, that's a very interesting and pertinent point. Who would want to take that first? Yeah, Mr. Bartlett.
I want to take on that because I just made a statement to the UN last week, at the UNGA, with regards to people being at the center of the recovery in tourism. And any discussion about people has to be building capacity. And education and training is at the heart of all of this. Our own experience in Jamaica, I'd like to use as an example of what that human capital development strategy could look like. We established quickly the Jamaica Center for Tourism Innovation. which is really a pathway training certification program for competent workers who are not certified. And so we begin on the basis that tourism is a low-skilled industry, unfortunately, but we are among the least paid of all industries. And the requirement for entry into tourism is usually relatively low in terms of certification levels. So we recognize that there had to be a whole change in the labor market arrangements in order to make tourism more attractive to our young people who are leaving school and who are being influenced by the technology. And also, especially in ex-colonial territories such as ours that are highly tourism dependent, and we have the burden of the historic process to deal with, the issue of service versus servitude, and trying to understand that praxis has become an issue. So we think that there needs to be greater investment now in building human capital in tourism. So we established that center, and in the process, in 3 years, we have certified over 20,000 workers of the industry. And what that certification does is to give them the capacity for mobility within the industry, while at the same time providing them with portability. So that stackable level of credentials enable them to move from one country to the other and to ply their wares. It also offered something else. It enabled us to classify the workers. So now you can be classified as a grade 1 cook and a grade 2 cook and a chef. And within the classification, you are able now to remunerate. But let me close by saying that what needs to happen in this recovery is a reimagining of the human capital development strategies in tourism. And in that way, a significant reform in the labor market arrangements so that tourism can be more attractive to our young people. The final thing we did was to establish an associate degree program in the high schools, so that now the upper end of the high schools, the students can graduate with an associate degree in hotel management and customer service. And that enabled an entry level in the industry that is equally acceptable. Then a pension plan. And tourism now has in Jamaica a pension plan which is the first of its kind in the world.
Ending thoughts. I want to end this. So, Mr. Falasi, I want to get you in, Mr. Al-Falasi. Yeah.
So maybe I have the liberty of answering the question, given my previous role as Minister of Higher Education and now responsible for tourism.
Yes.
I think we should not forget that the amount of mass layoffs that happened in tourism, which is one of the most susceptible to economic conditions, created a bitter taste in the workers there, right? As I recall, prior to my appointment in July of 2020, when I looked at the numbers of students and what did they apply for, we had a big spike in healthcare. I think it was about 50-something% in nursing and 60% in medical doctors. Why? Two reasons. One, they were highly regarded as the heroes of COVID. Secondly, they were the least vulnerable to losing their jobs. So if you put that in your mind today as a student in high school looking for a job, and you see some jobs that became extremely safe and secure, some jobs that suffered a lot of firing, and now they're, as you said, being hired again, it makes you question which job would they like more. Now again, having said that, we also hear about mass resignation, where employees now dictate their preferences because there's so much demand for talent now that the table has turned. So I think for us, one is to make sure that we try in a way to make sure that these job contracts provide a safer option. So allow for unpaid leaves instead of layoffs in any economic condition, recession. Try to promote tourism, if not as a job, maybe as a job as a company owner. So today, for example, within the Ministry of Economy, we've announced the first nationwide license as a tour guide. It used to be domestic at every emirate. Now we made it more nationwide. So these are areas where you can have freelancers, SME owners participate more into the economy. But when it comes to a job, I think we are facing an issue, and we're yet to see the next year or two, if that demand stays very high for jobs, then you will see the workforce more interested to get on. But today, they're being a bit wary and cautious, I think, from what they've seen.
I want short answers from all of you, and I'm going to come to you, Mr. Fayez. If you want to add to that point, we can start with that, but I want to hear your views, quick answers. The biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity as we embark on this new phase post-COVID-19 for the tourism industry. Let's start with you, Mr. Al-Fayez.
Well, going back to your question about human capital.
Human capital, yeah.
tourism, I think it's, we were aware of that early in Jordan, and I think what we have done could be looked at as a case study, because we did invest a lot in the hospitality industry. In the 80s, we didn't see many Jordanians being part of the tourism hospitality. We used to import a lot of expats to come to Jordan for such opportunities. Today, on the contrary, we are exporting Jordanians with that talent, because we have built the infrastructure, we have built the systems, so they are qualified. And as my colleagues have said, being qualified immediately to enter to the business. One of the biggest challenges that we were facing through the COVID is how do we maintain those people that we have invested in for many years. We have done good in Jordan in terms of the interference of the government on obtaining those workers within the industries, not only in the tourism industries, but in general. So we have created an incentive scheme that is given to the employee, how they keep those people. We looked at it in that way. We have invested a lot of time, money, and effort in bringing those capacity to that level. Losing them and bringing them back, and this is one of the biggest challenges that are facing today, as we said. These are the huge challenge that today you bringing that lost investment in the last 20, 30 years back to where it was today. It's going to take us time. It's going to take us money and a lot of effort. How quickly, if we work together, I think we can do that recovery as soon as possible. One of the opportunities that are out there, I think the opportunity is people are, in spite of all the challenges that are going around us, and in spite of all the inflations and so on, people want to travel. Believe me, people want to travel, you know, and we as they said, the revenge travel is back. People want to visit other countries, they want to feel free, they want to come. This is a good example of what we're talking about, you see.
Revenge travel is one big opportunity. Mr. Kereng, we have run out of time, so I want to come to you. Last question, and I want to keep it short. All of you, just very brief answers. The biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge post-COVID as you embark on this new era of tourism. Short answers, please.
Yes, the biggest challenge is, okay, we are all agreeing that tourists are ready and thirsty to visit, but the biggest challenge for us is facilitating ease of travel for these tourists and investors to come, so that we are able to shorten the time and the hassle of actually arriving at destinations, either for investment or for tourism purposes. We have problems with air connectivity. You know, we have long hauls, long routes, long hours of connecting, and to reach one destination, you have to sometimes connect 4 times and so forth. If we can improve on our alignment and redesign of our travel, air travel routes, we will be able to achieve, that ease of, reaching the destinations. Secondly, it is important for us to come up with new packages that are diversified, that will give the experience that is needed. And that means that we have to be able to identify lowest hanging fruits that will attract a tourist to the destination, and also, investors as well. So what we are doing now is to look at, for instance, talking about young people. What is it that they are able to do? They are techno-savvy. They like to use technology. In Botswana, we have started to mobilize them to be able to be the ones that are leading in terms of packaging the destinations, within technological forms, in digital forms, and actually our new National Arts Council is profiling young people for the different activities within the tourism sector. We talk about developing programs that will in future, from the lessons of COVID-19, help us to cushion the tourism sector, to cushion the economies, as well as also opening up for resistance and resilient tourism recovery. So those policies that and strategies are needed for us to be able to prepare ourselves for the future shocks. And I think that with those lowest hanging fruits, we can be able to actually attract people.
Thank you, ma'am, for those thoughts. And final word, gentlemen, we have run out of time, so I'm just going to give you one line each. One challenge and one opportunity.
One line. The big challenge is the human capital disruption. The response, I think, is technology can play a big role, and the marriage of human intelligence and machine intelligence will see us through.
Mr. Falasi, the final word to you. One big challenge, one big opportunity.
I'll be specific to the UAE. So the biggest opportunity is international long-haul travel. We've seen the length of stay jump from 3.2 to 4 days. If we can make it reach at 5 days, then we can attract more long-haul travel. That's the opportunity. I think the challenge for the UAE is to rebalance the price and quality. UAE tends to be a bit more overpriced compared to the region, but with the quality being effective, we need to make sure that we get that price and quality at the sweet spot.
Well, thank you so much for your comments. That was a very interesting discussion, a lot of insights from the distinguished panel. I want to thank all of you for joining us here in person, and Minister Kereng for joining us virtually from Botswana. Thank you so much for joining in this session. Thank you so much.